I want to welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Becky Shearman. I'm a program officer in the Technology Innovation and Partnerships Directorate at NSF. And I am here today to share with you a new program enabling partnerships to increase innovation capacity, also known as EPIIC. We are really excited to share this funding opportunity with you all today. And I have about 19-20 slides to kind of walk you through both the intent and the spirit of this program, as well as some of the details and how the program is structured and what you need to do to apply. We have the Q&A enabled, so please start dropping questions into the Q&A. And we have an hour. I don't think my presentation will take an hour, so we'll open it up to your questions once we get through the presentation. Okay, so why did EPIIC come into being? This was really put together with the intention to broaden participation in innovation ecosystems, specifically those that advance emerging technologies. And we wanted to do that by supporting capacity building efforts at institutions of higher ed that currently have limited or no research capacity, specifically to start building partnerships with external organizations to enable those universities to better plug into their regional innovation ecosystems. And maybe your organization, your university is looking to really connect with regional partners to build out your workforce development efforts or your R&D efforts, or maybe you're doing things and there's opportunity to focus on translation of research to practice. So whatever's right for your institution in terms of building those partnerships. So in that vein, the goals of the program are really to enable awardees to create those partnerships with external organizations to do those things in workforce research and development and translation to practice. If you're at all familiar with the Regional Innovation Engines program, those are the three pillars of the program that we are really looking at to build regional innovation ecosystems, right? Workforce development, R&D, and translation of that R&D to practice. So whether or not there's an engine in your region, if you're trying to plug into the happenings in your region around innovative technology, STEM, we want this program to be a way to help you connect into those things happening in your region. And hopefully through that, these new partnerships that you're able to form will be just the beginning for those institutions, and hopefully that can also pave the way to being able to secure future external funding to support the efforts that the institution is doing in emerging tech and regional innovation. So for this funding award, these will be continuing grants for up to 3 years. This is a little bit awkwardly put, but I will try to explain what the way this is structured. So we say that the estimated number of awards is 15. We have $20 million dedicated to this program. So rather than focusing on the 15, what we're interested in doing is funding up to 50 institutions, with each institution having about 400K, but they're going to ultimately create full proposals collaboratively. So those 50 institutions would be organized into cohorts, if you will, that would be up to maybe 15 cohorts. We're going to talk about all that as I get through this presentation. So who's eligible? Any institution of higher ed can apply for this funding opportunity if you are a non-R1 or R2 institution. So this is an effort specifically focused on those institutions that don't have the research capacity of the larger research institutions, and we're using the 2021 Carnegie classification of IHEs to determine whether or not you are eligible based on the R1, R2 status. We are specifically pointing to our minority serving institutions, our predominantly undergraduate institutions, and our two-year institutions, including community and technical schools that are not classified as R1, R2, to really consider applying for this funding. And if you have any questions about your eligibility relative to the Carnegie classification, you can always reach out to me or some of the other program officers that run this program, and the website lists all of our contact information there. Or you can contact engines@nsf.gov, which I will show at the end of the presentation as well. So who may serve as the PI? So the PI must hold a full-time administrative or faculty position at the proposing institution. So part-time administrators, adjunct faculty, temporary hires wouldn't be eligible. This funding opportunity is set up with both a preliminary proposal and a full proposal. For those preliminary proposals, we are asking that there be only one PI. So we're not looking to include co-PIs or collaborators. That said, we do want the PI to collaborate with up to 2 additional folks from their institution to participate in, it says Ideas Lab there, it really shouldn't, it should say workshops for EPIIC, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute. The due date for that preliminary proposal, oh, these dates are not correct, are they? February 15th. Right, my colleagues who are on the back end, if you could drop the correct dates into the chat for everyone. February 15th is the due date for the preliminary proposals, and they will also drop into the chat the due date for the full proposal. My apologies for that. So the funding process, as I mentioned, we have preliminary proposals that are required prior to full proposal. This is actually structured as a 3-phase funding process. Phase 1 is the submission of the preliminary proposal. We're going to walk through each of these phases. Phase 2 are a series of workshops where you're going to be working collaboratively with other folks that had their preliminary proposals accepted. If you read through the solicitation, you'll see that we actually indicate the dates of the various workshops, both virtual and in person. And so by submitting your submitting your preliminary proposal, we're accepting that as an indication that your team will be available to attend those workshops if your preliminary proposal is in fact accepted. If you get an invitation to join the workshops, then you participate in phase 2. And here we're going to bring all the folks that got these invitations together where they can really kind of work together to think about what the biggest challenges are and opportunities are for building capacity, and really ideate on the sort of things that they would want to do to build this capacity for building external partnerships. And then once they've gone through the workshops, they would be invited, depending on what comes out of the workshops, they would be invited to submit full proposals. So for full proposals can only be submitted by participants who attend the EPIIC workshops and then are invited to submit the full proposal. So if you notice in the chat, preliminary proposals are due February 15th, full proposals May 25th. Again, my sincere apologies for not catching that typo. It's a pretty important typo to have in the slide deck. So February 15th, preliminary proposals, May 25th, full proposals. Okay, so what's a part of, well, actually, let me take a step back. So the idea here is, we really want to facilitate capacity building for institutions that don't have a lot of capacity, specifically in research at their institutions. And we're using that kind of as a proxy for how much capacity and infrastructure the institution has in general. So we went into this under the assumption that a school that is eligible probably doesn't have a large team at their institution to put together a large complex proposal for this funding opportunity. Hence the preliminary proposal, where we're trying to keep the initial application as small as possible. So we're going to require these preliminary proposals, which require far fewer elements than a full proposal. So you would have to submit the project summary, which is a one-page document. And this is all laid out in the solicitation. In that summary, you would designate, if applicable to you, if you are an MSI, you would list up to 3 team members that you would be sending to the EPIIC workshops if your preliminary proposal gets accepted. And one thing to note there is at least one of the people attending needs to be an administrator. We don't specify the level of the administrator, simply because every institution is structured differently. The smaller the school, the leaner the staff. And so we didn't want to define the role of the administrator and create more complications at some of these smaller institutions. But really, we're looking for folks that are in a position at the institution to really try to facilitate some capacity building change at your institution. So a leader at the institution. The project summary does require an intellectual merit section. We recommend that you address the ways in which the institution can contribute to the best practices around capacity building that might be adopted by other institutions. And the new opportunities that you think can arise from partnerships that you can develop through participating in this funding opportunity. And then there's a broader impact section. We include some suggestions. So you may, you're not limited to this, but you may want to discuss how for broader impacts of this funding opportunity may help to enhance the full participation of MSIs, PUIs to your institutions in their regional innovation ecosystem. Okay, so project summary, brief one page. The actual project description is limited to 3 pages. And we have some very specific guidelines about what should go into that. So if you look at the solicitation, we ask for some descriptive statistics of your institution, including things like the number of undergraduates, master students, and PhDs from the previous academic year, and a table that includes federal research grant dollar amounts over the past 5 years. And there's details outlining that in the solicitation. We also ask that you can include a brief description of the team that would be attending and why each person is well suited to contribute to the project. So whether it's the position that they hold at the institution, the experience that they would bring to the workshop, those would be the things you want to discuss there. And then address the following 2 questions. So what does your institution wish to gain from participating in the EPIIC activities, the workshop activities, and then participation in the full proposals? And then how you currently support partnerships with external organizations. There's a broader impact section required. It could be maybe a little bit more fleshed out from what you said in the project summary. And then, as I mentioned, proposing teams will be selected from the preliminary proposals to attend these workshops. And that selection is really going to be based on the institution's need for capacity building and innovation partnerships, using all the information that you're providing in this project description. Slide. Okay, so for that preliminary budget, preliminary proposal, there is no budget required. You do have to include the biographical sketches and current and pending support for each team member that you've put in the preliminary proposal. If you're not very familiar with NSF applications and proposals, we point you to what we call here as the PAPG, the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide. And I reference this again at the end of this presentation, where you can get more information about what goes into the bio sketches and the current and pending support. Maybe I can ask one of the folks that are off camera right now to also drop a link to the PAPG. Okay, so if you get invited to the workshops, what is that going to entail and what will you have gotten yourself into? So the folks that are attending will work collaboratively with all the other attendees to help identify the impediments that they're facing around developing these partnerships, and they will figure out how to kind of sort themselves into cohorts based on what they want to accomplish through this funding opportunity, and strategize around the best way to make an impact in building capacity for these partnerships. Specific outcomes may include, that you actually identify the specific challenges that you want to address to enable these partnerships, identify actionable solutions and steps that you can take to address it, and then establish these collaborative cohorts that will then be the teams that generate the full proposals. I'm not going to walk through all of this. It's taken from the solicitation itself, but you can see there's a brief orientation, about 90 minutes of the workshops that will be virtual, starting third week of March. There would be 4 virtual sessions, about a half a day for each one, where we're really kind of just defining the scope of the opportunities and challenges associated with partnership building. And then we'll come together for a 3-day in-person workshop in Atlanta, Georgia, where you'll be able to work face-to-face and really kind of work on creating those solutions and building the cohorts. And then we'll come back together for one more virtual session to give feedback to each other. Something to note, I mentioned that there's no budget required for the preliminary proposal, so all the travel to the in-person workshops, the meals, travel, hotel will be covered by NSF, and then any incidentals would be, those expenses would be borne by the participant. But you don't need to worry about a budget for travel. So at the conclusion of the workshops, the cohorts will be invited to submit a collaborative full proposal. There's going to be a pretty tight turnaround time in terms of getting the full proposal written. You'll have about 5 weeks, roughly, a little more than that, I think. But you'll have a really solid start coming out of the workshops. The ideas have already kind of been vetted and really kind of fleshed out. And between the time that the workshops end and the full proposals are due, you will have access to grant writing support. So you'll have some mentors, almost like grant writing consultants, that will be able to give you quick feedback. So you can iterate with some folks with expertise in writing proposals. and then you'll submit that proposal. Full proposals will be reviewed by a panel, and then we'll make awards. The full proposal, I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail because it's a little bit down the road. You have to be invited to attend this, but we do lay out the elements of the full proposal in the solicitation. And as you can see, we asked for a project overview with the rationale, and that really needs to be tied to whatever happened in the workshop, right? The whole point here is that the content of the full proposal really is derived from the findings of the EPIIC workshops. You'll include all the participating institutions, and then those sections C and D, you can see it's sort of separated out what each of the, a section that would have all the individual institutions and what they are planning to do, what they want to accomplish, and a strategic plan for the goals for their institution specifically. And then section D are the collaborative plans, where how the individual organizations in that cohort are going to work together to help each other achieve their individual goals, and what kind of activities, events, what things they're going to engage with each other to try to advance everyone's plan. We asked for a brief evaluation plan, and like all NSF proposals, broader impacts and results from prior NSF support would be required. But that kind of lays out what the full proposal should look like. I mentioned this proposal and award policies and procedures guide. If you're not familiar with this, I strongly recommend that you download it and take a look. The link is in the chat. When you sit down to write even your preliminary proposal, we really recommend you sit down with the solicitation in front of you, because it lays out exactly what needs to be in that preliminary proposal. Have the PAPG out. I would point you to part 1, chapter 1, which just describes, there's a section in there about the different types of submissions. So there's some language in there about preliminary proposals, if you want to get a better understanding of what they are. But then really it's the chapter 2, there's a proposal preparation guide that can give you a lot of information about bio sketches and current and pending support, things like that. Research.gov is where you're going to submit your proposal. So you want to go there, familiarize yourself with that. There's a help function, and there's a hotline for questions. And then of course you can always reach out to your program directors. Before we wrap up and open up for questions, we do have another upcoming event. We recognize there's not a lot of time, unfortunately, with the holidays. We lost a little bit of time in January, but we are going to host on February 2nd a Q&A webinar. So it will be like this, but without me talking. It'll be a very, very brief introduction, and then we can spend the hour just taking your questions. So you can take this webinar, which will be recorded or is being recorded and posted. And you can look at that, you can work through the solicitation, and then bring whatever questions you have to the webinar. I've included the link on the slide deck. We'll drop it in the chat as well. When you register, we are asking that you submit your questions in advance. And if you do that, we'll go through them, and we'll certainly try to prioritize questions that are submitted when you register over questions that come in during the Q&A. Of course, we'll try to get through all the questions, but sometimes we can't, just due to time limitations. So please do consider attending the webinar. the Q&A webinar and submit your questions in advance. The other thing is we have a very, very brief 2-question anonymous survey that we would like you to answer while you're still logged on here. This is just for us to get a sense of who that's attending is considering applying for this. So we have a sense of what the interest is out there. So if you could go to the SurveyMonkey link that was just dropped into the chat, and it probably won't even take you 20 seconds to do it. We would really appreciate that. Before I completely open this up for questions, again, I just want to emphasize that for this funding opportunity, this is really, it's different in a lot of ways, right? We've got this very structured preliminary proposal, series of workshops, and then invitation to submit a full proposal. But in addition to that, this is about capacity building, and it's not necessarily centered around just growing your research capacity at your university. When I walked through the sorts of demographic information that we're collecting, we are asking, what is, how many federal research grants have you received? We're using that as an indicator of capacity, but we certainly don't want to send a message that what we're only trying to accomplish with this funding opportunity is to build capacity in research. This really is about plugging into what's happening in your region in emerging tech innovations, however it makes the most sense for you to connect. Again, you can see there's a tight correlation between this and the Engines program. We encourage folks who are a part of Engines proposals, if you fit the criteria for this, consider using this as a way to help further connect you into what hopefully will be built up in your region. So it could be workforce, it could be research, but these aren't sort of pilot projects to start like getting students into an apprenticeship at a local company. It's about building the partnerships so those things could then be created after the fact, right? So it's less about the activities and more about the infrastructure and capacity building around the partnerships. And I'll stop there and open it up for questions. I want to thank everyone. Questions can go to engines@nsf.gov. And they're not here with us today, so I can't introduce you to everybody, but I am one of the program officers on this. Jeffrey Brown and Nina Maung are all program officers on this, so you can reach out to any of us as well. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to bring Korie. If we can just screen share or highlight me and Korie. I'm sure we've had plenty of questions coming in, and Korie's going to help me.
We've had a few questions. So thank you all for your questions. We will try to get to as many of them as possible. And if not, please just send them to engines@nsf.gov. But the number one question we kept getting was about where is this going to be available after? Where can we find the slides? Where can we find the recording?
Very good question. I think that it will be made available on probably on the Engines website, but we can also send links to this out to the attendees and to the Engines mailing list as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that question. First question is, where do we anticipate the in-person workshop to be held? And yeah, what are the dates?
So the in-person workshop, and this is all in the solicitation, it's a 3-day workshop. I believe it'll be at Emory, and it's April 11th through the 13th.
Thank
All
you.
the other events will be virtual.
Next, does it imply that R2 institutions are not eligible?
Correct.
And then is it correct that all partners would be non-R1, R2 institutions, or can non-R1, R2 propose to partner with an R1, R2 institution?
So this funding opportunity will hopefully enable those partnerships, but in terms of partnerships for the proposals, they would just be the non-R1, non-R2. And then they're going to be coming up with, working together through these workshops, strategies to build these partnerships. And it may be, if what they're trying to do is build out partnerships with R1 and R2 institutions, they'll be building out a proposal with a series of activities to try to enable that. So I wouldn't be surprised if you get contacted as an R1 or R2 through this, but you wouldn't serve as a partner on a proposal.
Thank you for that clarification. So are HBCUs inside the MSI category, MSI being minority serving institution?
Absolutely, yes. And thank you for defining the acronym there. Yeah, so HBCUs, Hispanic serving institutions, tribal colleges, any type of minority serving, the caveat there is not all minority serving institutions. Let me rephrase that. Some minority serving institutions are R1 or R2 institutions, and so therefore you would not be eligible.
And another question on eligibility, are only institutions in the US eligible?
Yes, this would be for United States located universities.
As far as R1 and R2, we had a few questions about the Carnegie classification. Could you, in Carnegie classification terms, tell us what a R1, R2 would look like?
So R1 and R2 is going to be based on funding, research dollars. Let me see. See if I have any information here where I can be more specific in my response.
Nina, if you want to come on and add anything,
yeah,
or say anything, you can.
Or we can give me just a sec, like maybe we can come back to that so that we can highlight it.
Going a little bit more into administrator roles, I guess, what is the definition of administrator for the program?
So that's a really good question. And like I alluded to in the question, or in my presentation, we've kept this very vague. And it's why in the preliminary proposal, we're asking for you to describe, right, the person who's the PI will be one of the 3 people attending. And it's up to 3, you don't have to send 3. We recognize that for some institutions that may just be too many people to really dedicate to dedicate to the activities. Doesn't mean that hopefully they're working at their institution on the project, but maybe just actually attending the meetings is a bit much. So really we haven't defined it. We are kind of asking you to think about who within your administration is the best suited to do this kind of work, right? You can imagine that it's why let me put it this way, it's why we are saying that we didn't want a team of 3 faculty only, because we felt like if this is going to be truly capacity building, we need to have people who are more senior at the institution who can really try to play a more visible institutional lead role in what is trying to be accomplished. It makes sense if part of the strategic plan of the institution, for example, isn't tied to this somehow. You know, it'll be someone who has that kind of institutional perspective, but we didn't want to be so prescriptive where we would tell you where that person fits within your hierarchy, because we are trying to keep this open to institutions that, like I said, may be very lean or have unique structures, and we can't predict who the right person is. So it's really up for you to tell us who they are and why they're the right person.
Thank you for that clarification. Just real quick, because I keep seeing it in the chat, can you do a quick overview of the Engines program and how
Sure.
EPIIC is linked?
Yes, absolutely. So the Engines program is the first new program that TIP launched. It's a very large program, full Engines, and Engines is short for Regional Innovation Engines. It's a funding opportunity that brings a diverse set of partners within a region of service together to try to build an innovation ecosystem. So think of, Silicon Valley, Pittsburgh recently has really kind of built up ecosystem around AI and robotics that has really sort of taken off and is driving a whole economy around the emerging tech in AI and robotics. So something like that is what we're looking to try to fund and seed in regions across the country. And in this funding opportunity, we point to things like, what is the emerging technology that would drive the R&D of the engine? Imagine that R&D is taking off in the engine. And I should back up and say, a proposing team for an engine has to define their region of service, right? So you can say, the state of Missouri is our region of service. Maybe it's a couple states, maybe it's just, any kind of region. It can cross state borders. But we've got a research idea that will really drive R&D in some emerging tech that can solve a big societal problem. And in doing so, we're also going to build up the infrastructure to get the findings of that R&D out. We refer to it as the translation of that practice into society. So whether that's commercialization through startups, open source ecosystems, whatever it is, clinical work, getting medical devices out into the hospitals, right? There's a pipeline from the R&D to whatever the societal impact is. And then also they're working on their workforce development so that as the R&D is taking off in the region is also building up their capacity to train a local workforce across everything from, the future researchers that are going to drive this, the technicians, the practitioners, entrepreneurs. And so these are very large. They're 10 years long, up to $160 million investments from NSF. And what we heard when we were promoting this is that for a lot of very small institutions, they either don't even know how to begin building partnerships with the local companies in their region. They've tried and they can't get attention from whether it's an industry partner, a large university, or even if they're interested, they don't have the personnel and the expertise situated within their university to be the one reaching out and trying to foster those partnerships. So we heard that time and time again. So if NSF is going to be investing in regional innovation ecosystems, then we're really wanting to look for ways to support those smaller institutions that are trying to plug in, but but have some capacity building challenges that make it hard for them to do that. So that's the link, right? And now you don't have to be a part of an engine's proposal. An engine proposal doesn't even have to be in your region. If they are, we do ask you to include that information in your preliminary proposal. Doesn't have to be the case. You can still be looking to connect with other organizations locally to try to scale up the impact that you're trying to make as a university. Does that make sense?
Thank you for that description, Becky. We'll move on to some about costs for the in-person workshop. What is NSF going to cover, and what is up to the participants?
Okay, so NSF is going to cover the travel, the hotel, and meals during the workshop. So really, it's other incidentals that the individuals may be expenses that come from other sorts of incidentals, right? If you're gonna order lots of room service and all that sort of stuff beyond the meals that we're providing or whatever, that would be on you. But the travel, the hotel, and the meals during the workshop would be covered by NSF.
Thank you for that. Another question, we'll move a little bit into the prelim proposals. So do all members of the team described in the preliminary proposal need to attend all workshops to be eligible for the full proposal?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
I said, do all members of the team described in the prelim proposal need to attend all workshops to be eligible for the full proposal?
No, we don't specify that. We recognize it, especially for the really small organizations out there. It's a heavy lift, and if you're a faculty member, you've got a huge teaching load. It can be hard. We do hope that there is sufficient communication, right? So if you've got a 3-person team and all 3 folks can't attend every single workshop, hopefully you can all attend the in-person workshop. But you are communicating with each other, everyone's staying informed. And if one person's attending one virtual and someone else is attending the other, there's been enough communication between the two of you that the person coming to the second event, can kind of knows where they're at and can participate fully with kind of the background knowledge that came out of the previous meeting. But we recognize that may be hard.
How critical is it to get a letter of collaboration from a company for the prelim proposals?
So if you go through the solicitation, additional documents beyond what we lay out are not accepted. So we don't want anything like that. We really kind of lay out in that preliminary proposal the very basic things that we want you to include, and we don't want you to include anything else.
How many applicants will be invited to the workshops?
So we have up to maybe 150 attendees to the workshops. Each institution can have up to 3 folks. So the number of institutions could be is a little bit unknown.
Thank you. Another one is on the partnerships. Are there any particular type of partnerships that they should address? And also, they want an insight on the areas where they can build partnerships and capacity in.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, so how do I want to address this? So this is going to be specific to your region, right? The type of partnership is going to be somewhat dependent on who's in your region, who do you want to be building relationships with, and what you want to do with them, right? But at the same time, we are, as at TIP, really thinking about how we are growing the nation's strength in future and emerging technologies, right? So we're looking for you to connect into those aspects of your region, right? So we're not necessarily looking for you to support partnerships with, the local hotel in your region, unless there's some kind of technology-driven piece to why that partnership makes sense, right? I'm not going to say that it would not be allowed, but you'd really have to justify why they're the folks, especially if you had a large, factory or you're Boeing in your area, for example, and you're not interested in building partners with them, but you're interested in building partners with the Hilton, right? So we are trying to ways in which you can really advance your contributions to the STEM R&D enterprise. For your institution, it may be around building up the workforce to supply, to supply the companies in your region with future employees. Maybe it is about R&D, maybe it is about entrepreneurs, but it does need to be rooted in some kind of emerging or novel technology that can kind of advance the STEM enterprise.
Thank you for that. We did have a few questions about cohorts.
Okay.
A lot.
Cohorts, okay.
So I guess could you go deeper into what you mean by cohorts? Is it based on region? Is it based on institution? How will they be organized?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of cohort idea. That's more of what we got in terms of those questions.
Okay, that is it's a really great question, or a really great series of questions, it sounds like. And that is something that we have been having a lot of discussions with as we are putting together these workshop events. And really, we've been thinking about what makes the most sense, right? And we can make an argument for why building cohorts around a common challenge or opportunity may make a lot of sense. Alternatively, it also may make a lot of sense for a cohort to be centered around a common region or a common set of partners that they want to engage with. So at the moment, we're leaving all of that open. And we want to let the ideation that happens at these workshops be the thing that drives how cohorts come together. So a lot of this is unknown. We're not defining the size of the cohorts. We do feel that having that cohort model provides a couple of things. It provides a community of folks who are trying to tackle something similar to you, which can be beneficial to everybody. It may also provide an opportunity to leverage everybody's dollars in a way that you can do common activities, reach out to a organization or a mentorship group that can maybe help give you the guidance that you need. If you all need it, you can all kind of go in on it together. So you can think some aspects of the activities you want to do from a collective perspective, but you can also think about the things that you want to do that are relative or unique to your institution. So we do think the cohort model is really beneficial, but we also recognize that every institution is trying to accomplish something unique to their institution. So we've really left this concept of cohort very flexible. And it's something that'll be really fleshed out during the workshops, like I said, as the ideation and the co-creation of proposal ideas comes together.
Thank you. We also had a clarifying question about the 400K and how that would be distributed.
Mhm.
Is it they get 400K each? How long is the period? There were a few questions in regards to that.
Fair enough, yeah. So awards will be for up to 3 years. And this is, it's a little bit awkward here because there's so much that we've left open. So we envision up to 400K going to each university that participates and gets invited to submit a full proposal. But how each institution comes together in a cohort is going to vary, right? Because we don't really know what's going to happen during these cohorts. And we've also left open how the full proposal gets submitted, if it's collaborative awards, if it's a single award with sub-awardees. So I guess the best way to think about this is if as an institution, you would have up to 400K to work with, but you'd be working with other universities that also have that 400K to think about what kind of things you need to accomplish that would be activities, both maybe individual for you, but also ways in which you can do some things that may benefit everyone in your cohort. Hope that clarifies the question.
Thank you for that, Becky. Let's see. You guys all have great questions. I'm trying to get them all answered and grouped into one to make sure we get them. Let's see. In terms of proposal outcomes, what does a successful partnership that we establish look like?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
I said, in terms of proposal outcomes, what does a successful partnership that we establish look like?
So I guess proposal outcomes for the preliminary proposal or the full proposal. I guess this would be for the full proposal.
I'm guessing full proposal.
Most you would say full proposal.
I'm gonna say full.
So you know, that's a good question. You know, we are hoping, so a couple of things. One, we want to acknowledge the fact that every institution is going to be starting at a different point, and so outcomes are going to be relative to their starting point, and that's something that we would take into consideration for sure. But I think in some cases an outcome might be a really great partnership with an entity, but more importantly, I go back to all the conversations we were having more than a year ago now with a lot of these smaller institutions that were just felt like they didn't even know how to engage with, you know, what is it that an industry partner wants to hear, or an industry entity wants to hear, that is gonna make them give some thought to a real partnership with you, right? There's a lot of expertise out there, and large institutions have, you know, whole offices and divisions dedicated to building out these partnerships. So, you know, maybe some of the outcomes are not about the partnerships themselves, but about the capacity and expertise that the institution is building, so that they now can go out and start connecting with future partners. Like I said, it's all going to kind of vary depending on what they currently have, what their starting point is, and where they want to go.
So we're going to go back a little to some eligibility questions.
Okay.
Can nonprofits be eligible to partner and sub to a university or a community college?
So I think, So we are trying to encourage all sorts of partnerships, right? For the specifics of the proposal and this funding opportunity, the only folks that are going to be on the proposals are the eligible institutions. At least for the preliminary proposals, right? I don't see, even in the full proposals, this is really about the 400K going to the institution for them to build capacity for partnerships. If there are organizations that want to partner with them, that's great. But I wouldn't be thinking about this as a funding opportunity for that partner to be a sub-awardee on a proposal.
Okay. We have one about the EPIIC institution, which is Asian American. And so, but Asian Americans are not necessarily underrepresented in STEM. Do they still count as an MSI?
Yeah, so yes, so if you're classified as an MSI, any of those designations we would consider. So include that in your application. Again, MSI is not an eligibility requirement. We're just strongly encouraging those that are MSIs of whatever. There are a lot of classifications beyond just HBCU, HSI, TCU. If you fall into any one of those classifications, please indicate that in the preliminary proposal, but know that you don't have to be, right? You can be a predominantly white institution, PWI, and be a predominantly undergraduate institution, a PUI, and we would still encourage you to consider this, this funding opportunity. But if you are an MSI, it is something that we are specifically trying to promote amongst the MSI. So we want to know if you fall under that classification.
Okay. I think for our last question before we end, and just to note, we have all your questions. We will compile them and do an FAQ. And if you have something that's very specific, please again, engines@nsf.gov, and we will get to them. Last one, I think, because this has to do with engines. If the PI and home institution is a partner in a submitted engine type 1 proposal, should that be listed in the EPIIC proposal? And can we build on what was developed in the engines proposal?
Absolutely. And in fact, if you go through the solicitation in the preliminary proposal language, we ask if you are part of an engines proposal, we actually ask for you to include the proposal ID number for that, a couple other bits of information. And so we would hope that if you're thinking about those things, absolutely leverage what's happening there. And I know we've got only one more minute, and there was that question about the Carnegie classification. I was unable while we were doing this to pull it up so I could be looking at it, but we can add that to the Q&A.
I can respond to that,
Okay,
Becky.
okay.
Yeah. So in the Carnegie classification, if you look it up, and the link was provided in the solicitation, if you look it up, you'll see basic classifications, and the institutions that are classified as Research 1 will appear as very high, and the institutions that are Research 2 will be classified as high. So if there are other sort of kind of characteristics that you'll see, and so when you look up the institution, your own institution in the Carnegie institutional lookup, as long as it doesn't say very high or high as a classification, then your institution, in terms of the Carnegie part of the requirements, would be eligible. So I hope that helps in terms of clarification.
Thank you, Nina. I was afraid of answering that without looking at the information in front of me, and I just couldn't quite pull that together.
Sure.
So we are at the top of the hour. I hope this was useful for you all, and please, if you haven't already, fill out the Survey Monkey. Take you less than 20 seconds to complete it. And also, please consider registering for the upcoming Q&A webinar. And if you can submit your questions while you register, then we will prioritize those and make sure we get answers to you at the beginning of the webinar. And with that, I just want to thank everyone for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at future events.